On this episode of the ExploreVM Podcast, we take a look at keeping the band, or in a more realistic setting, the family together when you and your partner are both working professionals. Hello and welcome to the ExploreVM Podcast. Today my guests have managed not one but two road warrior lifestyles and managed to keep the family together, keep the relationship together, and keep everything running smoothly. So why don't you two introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Heather Hickey, and I am the known as Always Moving Mom on Twitter, which is really a great name, I think, because I'm always on the move. I spent 13 years in corporate America, and 10 of those years I spent 80% on the road. So I will let Nigel introduce himself, and then we'll get into our family.
Wow, that's a lot of travel. I am Nigel Hickey, the other half of the Hickey family, or Team Hickey, like we like to say at home, hashtag Team Hickey. So what I do is I work now for VMware in the Cloud Practice Business Unit as a technical marketing engineer.
Together we have 4 children and 3 dogs and 1 house that is almost still brand new since we just moved in a year ago. So we've got a lot going on. Nigel and I, our oldest is 23 and getting married at the end of this year.
Yeah.
And then we have a 20-year-old son who will be 21 here shortly. We have a 17-year-old son who is a junior in high school. And we have a 12-year-old daughter who is in the 6th grade, headed on to the 7th grade. And then we have 3 little rugrats that run around on 4 legs, who are probably bigger babies than everybody else.
That sums it up.
All right, so the idea for this episode was relayed to me through members of the V community because you two had presented at Spice World a couple years back on this very topic, and I went through and I researched it, and I thought this is an absolute great fit for my audience and information I find useful. And I will include the link to that session in my show notes as well. So let's start at the beginning. Obviously, you don't just instantly enter a relationship and go, this is exactly how we're doing things. It's going to take some trial and error. It's going to take a little bit, I'm assuming, seeing things that are getting a little bit chaotic. How did you start to develop like your planning and just the general groundwork for what kept everything together?
So, being married and being a parent, we try to plan as best as possible, but I don't think it was really planned to work out the way that it did. It just it ended up growing. I'll use a marketing word, organically. So I would say it started back when I was not traveling. So I had a job, unlike today, where I was in an office traveling about an hour away from home every day. At that time, Heather was working a job where she was on the road 80%. So that could mean that she was gone for 2 weeks. It could mean she was gone for 1 week and just home Friday, Saturday and do it again. So it got to the point where we just were kind of not really, the point of saying, hey, we miss each other. Of course that happens, but it's more things weren't really jiving, like you're trying to catch up on bills, you're trying to catch up on this, trying to catch up on time to hang out and watch a movie together, that you can still have a relationship together and know who each other is. So it kind of grew from there. I think Heather can fill in there, but it's something that started in small pieces and became, I guess you would say, the program we have today.
So Nigel coined this phrase. We both have had starter marriages where we've been married previous to this. And those marriages obviously didn't work for a multitude of reasons. And here we are today trying to figure out, we knew walking into this marriage what we didn't want and what we did want. And we've had some pretty strong feelings about what we didn't want in marriage.
Right.
It's not that I'm saying everybody needs a starter marriage. I'm just saying it worked out in our favor.
No, I don't recommend starter marriages. However, what I do recommend is having some pretty strong feelings about what you are looking for in marriage. And I was looking for a partnership. I wasn't looking for a lot of rigid roles surrounding who did what, and that's a woman's job and that's a man's job. So we have a very untraditional marriage in a lot of ways because we're both very open to having those fluid roles within our family. And so that's kind of how we got started. But it was a lot of trial and error. When I first started working and was traveling on the road, our daughter was only about 4 months old.
Yeah.
Our youngest daughter. And she has some additional needs in life. And so we really flew by the seat of our pants for a little while. And I would say unsuccessfully in some ways and successfully in other ways. Like nobody died and we both had jobs and we stayed married. But in the same breath, we didn't know what we were doing with finances. We didn't know who was
taking who to the doctor.
Yeah. None of that worked. And it was really starting to weigh on Nigel and I. And because of those not wanting to replay things in our starter marriages, we really had to sit down and say, okay, we're doing this wrong. It's got to come together. So where are we going to start? And I think that's just kind of how we did it. And it has evolved into this very mostly smooth running machine.
Yeah.
Mostly. For the most part. But we have some tricks and some tips and things that we do on a regular basis that help keep us moving forward. And there's lots of reasons as to why we do what we do. And it's probably because somewhere along the way we forgot to do something. So.
Well, why don't you go ahead and start to tell us about these tips and tricks? And obviously it's not going to work for everybody. No two couples are the same, but
right.
Again, listening to your session earlier, I found some interesting, useful content out of it. So why don't we just dive right in?
So the first thing that I'm going to bring up, and this has just made another kind of reappearance recently.
Do you want to let's back up a little bit. I like to start with Netflix. So the cheapest way to keep date night alive was Netflix. I mean, we're movie fans. We like to go out, but having the baby at the time, we did Netflix before it was cool. Netflix and chill came out. I mean, we were Netflix before that. So, CDs in the mail, Netflix.
Oh yeah.
So that was our first. Let's reconnect. So if you're home for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're totally watching movies at least 2 days that week. And if it's drinking wine or coffee together or whatever it is, that's our time. So that was the beginning. And then from there, the next little things happened when we ran into those roadblocks, if it was bill paying or needed more time for relationships than just, movie time and stuff like that.
But Netflix, I think Nigel's right. Netflix and chill is kind of where the very basic of we became very intentional with our time. I think a lot of times, working families and working couples, they're like, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. And that's great. But Nigel and I are like, okay, this is very intentional time. We are planning this. There is nothing that's going to deter us unless somebody has broken a bone or their hair is on fire. This is our time. This is our thing. And we began to value our time and our relationship above all things, but still working around all things. So Netflix is where that kind of started. And then after that, we have incorporated the Big Purple Book, which was definitely something that we talked about several years ago at Spiceworks, and we still do it. The Big Purple Book is a leather-bound book that I bought when we were first.
It might have been right before we married.
Right before we got married, and Nigel and I have spent the years since then, writing in the Big Purple Book, and the Big Purple Book is a way of us saying, especially when we're traveling, or especially when someone is gone, or I was gone for 3 weeks. It was a way for me to write down, hey, I love you. Thank you so much for everything you do for our family. I'm really going to miss you. And it became a book of letters. I will not say that it became a book of love letters, Because there are times that Nigel and I have said, this is not working. This is not working in our marriage. Something we have disconnected. Something's going on, and we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's a great way of communicating because sometimes I'm a better writer than I am a communicator.
Yeah.
So it works really well for me. Nigel does a great job as well in it. And my hope is that eventually my children will be able to read that book of letters. They have never, the kids know about the Purple Book, but they know that they're not allowed to touch it at this moment. My hope is that in the future they will be able to see, oh, that's how mom and dad did it.
Right.
That's why they were so successful. Here's their letters to each other talking about how they actually talked to each other and said, this isn't working or this is working.
And it wasn't really, you're in relationships, yourself, so you don't really have you don't start off with hey, this isn't working. It's usually today sucked, and this is why.
Right.
But you flip through the book and you realize wow, okay, we got through that. That was a pretty rough time in life, because occasionally we'll pop it back open for our own sanity and look through it. And the funny thing, Heather pulled it open, I want to say first or second week that I had started at VMware, and there was a contract in there that I was I wouldn't say I was held at knife or gunpoint, but I wrote the contract. It said I will get my both of my VCAPs completed by a certain date, and that was in there. And the funny thing is, thank God I did it. I signed off on this, but we put funny things in there as well as I care about you. This sucks. I love you. Let's try to work through this type of thing. And it was a good connection because it's also we kind of surprise each other with it. We don't write it in front of each other, and we try to hide it under the pillow or the couch, cushion or something like that. So when you sit down, you notice that, oh, I have something to read today.
So that was one thing that we did. Another thing that we did that has been very helpful is we schedule meetings, and we still do that to this day. And meetings are scheduled in Outlook. We treat them as a business meeting. When you're walking into a business meeting, you're not bringing in you didn't do the dishes, you didn't pick up after the dog, the trash didn't go out. No, you walk in and you have your list of things to do, and it's very businesslike. There's no emotion to it. There's just it's business. We have to do this. And we talk about budgets, or we talk about goals, or we talk about
vacation.
We talk about kids. We talk about all of those things, but they are, again, very intentional time. We do it after our children are in bed, or our youngest is in bed. I'm sorry, our oldest kids can do whatever they need to. But, it's just the two of us. We do not try to hold a meeting with Nigel and I in the middle of, sitting at the kitchen island. That's never going to work. My kids are all over my house.
Talking your face off.
Exactly. And they're like, oh, mom's home for 10 minutes. I got to say all of these things. No, we're very intentional, and we talk about calendars, and Nigel and I take personal and professional calendars and put them all into one family calendar. And so we have this constant communication about, where things are going in our family and what's coming up next and all of those great things. But it is a meeting. It is a meeting, and we treat it as a meeting. Now, our meetings have wine at them. But
always. So that makes it way easier to attend the meeting with a bottle of wine.
Absolutely. But it's still a meeting. I mean, how many couples spend, and I'm going to put this kind of bluntly, but waste time fighting over money?
Right.
Well, would you fight with your boss about money? I mean, maybe, but it's not a conversation where all of these emotions come into a meeting. It's a meeting. It's facts. You make X, I make X. This is what needs to be paid. End of story.
Right.
So we've just kind of gotten out of that whole wasting the time with the emotion part of it, because we use our emotions in a positive way when it's not a meeting.
Right. And I think the great thing is, it almost was unintentional but definitely needed, is not having those meetings in the bedroom before you fall asleep. You're talking before bed, and you're talking about things, and you're either they're positive or negative, and kind of for sake of, namaste and keeping everything, sane in the, your bedroom, you should, keep that talk, I think, out of there. And that has helped us. Like, we have our meetings in the garage.
Okay.
We have a sign in our garage that says whatever happens in my garage, stays in my garage. So it's like a good place, plus that's where the wine fridge is, so that worked out. And it keeps it away from there, so we can have our talk about, hey, we're saving our butts off for vacation next year, or we're putting some payments down towards the wedding, or I'm traveling this week. So we go through those things, and we don't have to have that conversation, in the bedroom. We could be, watching movies and doing adult hangout times.
But it also helps not being interrupted 43 times by children. I mean, how frustrating is it to be like, okay, I have a husband who travels and I need to talk to him face to face, and you've got, hey, Mom, Dad, hey, where's my, all of those interruptions are constant, and it just ends up that you don't ever get to your agenda.
Right.
And there is an agenda that needs to be done in every family. Every family has an agenda, and it's us using our time intentionally to get through that agenda is paramount to this family working. And then the other thing is, we talk about goals a lot, and we have short-term and long-term goals for our family. And they have a lot to do. The reason that we have goals, I guess, is that
because everybody should have goals.
Everybody should have goals, right? But it gives us a sense of drive. It gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us a sense of, family and community and all of those things, because we're spread pretty thin, with 4 kids and jobs and everything. It gets to be a lot. So we talk about our short-term goals. Right now we're on a health and fitness thing and getting that started and getting back on track. So we talk a lot about some of our short-term goals that way. We have long-term goals. Nigel and I, we're going back to Jamaica in 2019. I don't care what happens. That takes a lot of planning. You can't just pick up and leave for the 2 of you and leave 4 kids and 3 dogs and not have a plan in place. So there's a lot of planning that goes behind that.
Yeah.
But that is the goal, financially, emotionally, everything for us in 2019 is to make it to Jamaica. And so we have those goals that we work towards as a couple and as a family. I have no doubt that if you were to call any one of my children in here right now, they could tell you #Team Hickey and what some of the goals are for the year.
But we won't, because they're annoying. They're kids.
Yeah.
They are the older ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, we really talk about, even with our children, stepping up to the plate when Dad's gone, or stepping up to the plate when Mom needs to leave, and those kinds of things. And our kids can tell you all the time about what the goals are and kind of the direction that we're going in, because we do communicate with our children to bring them in to the team.
Right.
So I would say every couple needs to really determine what those goals are, if they're long-term, if they're short-term, and what needs to be done. Is this something that, are you going to make a dream a reality? For us, going to Jamaica the first time was turning a dream into reality, and we worked our tails off to do it. It took us 4 years, I think.
Something like that. Something great. That was our first big vacation
without kids.
Without kids in 10 years or something. So
yeah, it was ridiculous. Yeah. It was crazy.
And just to kind of roll back on what we did a couple years ago, things changed in our family. A little bit of role reversal. I went from the customer side of working 24/7 and being on call to going through working at partners and now working at a vendor. And in that time frame, also Heather had stepped away from corporate America and had a chance to be home and work when she felt that she wanted to work. So, substituting in our school district, she's been spending a lot of time helping kids in the community in and out of school. So that's a new focus for her. And the bigger kids got older, which obviously helps us with more ease of built-in babysitting. And I've had that question come up too, where folks, want to have a little bit better balance, but they're in that cusp of, younger children, families aren't close by.
Right.
We have that issue too. Our families are not in Texas where we are. We just have a good community of friends and the older kids. Our families are one on the East Coast and one's on the West Coast, so we're kind of stranded without the grandparents around. So it's tough. You just have to kind of find your way or find your niche that works for you guys. I mean, it doesn't mean that we go out every weekend or every night. We probably haven't hung out together besides this podcast in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. So we definitely have some bigger issues happening. We've got some, aging parents and that kind of thing that are now being thrown into the mix. And Nigel and I are trying to take the tools that we do have and the things that we have learned and fold those into daily life now that we have some new challenges ahead of us. So it's definitely been interesting. We do have, a child that I won't say is special needs because she's definitely not special, but she does have some extra needs in life. And so I needed to find a way in my career to step back a little bit. She's that 4-month-old that was easy for Nigel to, take care of. I won't say easy, but 4 months old is way different than a 12-year-old going through puberty.
Right.
So
yeah, thanks for being home.
Yeah, so I'm home more, but we have taken a lot of the stuff that we've learned or the things that we do in our communication style and have just reversed it and moved on. I mean,
it didn't take much to change. I mean, we kind of just went with the flow. So
it was good, but one of the other things we do about being intentional with our time is being intentional with our time. I don't stress that enough in that
it's kind of like disciplining a little bit on kids. Like when you say like, next time you're getting a timeout or you're getting a spanking type of thing and you don't follow through. It's like, you got to follow through with those things.
With the kids.
We promise each other that we're going to, be in the meeting together or we're going to dinner next weekend or whatever it is. We're hitting those targets. We're not missing them unless something out of our control gets in the way, if that's home, family, or some kind of work emergency.
Right. Parent is sick or whatever. But we're very intentional. Like we don't. Nigel and I haven't really sat down and seen each other for 2 weeks. Nigel was traveling. Nigel's dad was visiting us. There was a couple of kid issues. There's always wedding stuff going on. I'm, teaching not often, but a lot more than I thought I would be. And so we've had to really go back to some of the things that we started with, which is being super intentional with our time and scheduling, going back to our basic love language, which goes back to something that we presented in Spice World. It's called the FU card. And I know the FU card
a crowd favorite.
A crowd favorite, right? So Nigel and I have a quirky sense of humor with each other, and we don't get offended at a whole lot when we talk to each other. But the FU card came out of the fact that Nigel and I, we both have worked for corporate America. We know what it's like, and we have seen friends who have, spouses who call in the middle of the day, and they're like, hey, how's it going? And the person on the other end of the phone is like, oh my God, my hair is on fire. My boss is up my behind and alligators are stacking on my ankles. But that person doesn't want to upset a wife or a husband and say, oh, I need to go right now.
Right.
Well, in reality, then, Nigel would come home and be like, oh my God, I totally couldn't. I had to cut you off in that meeting and you were talking too long. So we ended up with finding our own language, which was the FU card. And so basically, if I call Nigel or he called me during the day or even text and the other person said, F you, the next words out of your mouth are either somebody has a broken bone or okay. If it's not an emergency, then the person receiving the FU card now is on radio silence until the player of the FU card comes back and says, hey, sorry, I was caught up in a huge project, a deadline, a server went down, whatever it may be.
My boarding pass won't scan on the plane, and I'm holding up the whole line.
Whatever that may be.
funny things like that. But it's it's more, I guess,
our funny way.
It's our funny way, right? So we don't actually spell out the word. It's basically a capital F and a capital U, and that's basically it on a text message. And usually it's a smiley face or a thumbs up or something after that.
And that's it.
And that's it. And we move on, and then we know that someone on the other side is super busy, so we'll get back to each other shortly.
And we've learned that it's not what is the word I'm looking for? Like, you don't say F you to me when you're just like, I don't want to talk. You're like actually like super busy.
Yes,
and
yeah.
I don't find offense. So we've had people in conferences say, oh my God, my wife would be so angry at me if I said F you. And I'm like, okay, that's the word that works for us.
Right.
This is the word
It
that
could
works
be
for everybody.
hold the boat, hold the train,
It could be anything.
whatever code word you want to come up with that means, hey, I am super busy right now, and
I need you to value my time.
Yeah, value my time. I'm busy, and especially in Heather's career, she was doing a lot of training and auditing and things that needed her attention at the moment. And the same with IT. You know how that goes. There's always a fire to put out somewhere usually.
Right.
So it worked really well for us. And people that have had the understanding of the sense of humor, I think, get it. Some people, it's not going to work. It's not going to work you can't turn around and have that relationship, or if that's something that never comes out of your family's mouth. I'm not saying make sure you say F you to each other.
What
I'm
we're
saying
saying
find your balance or your word or something that says, hey, honey, I'll be back. I value you and you value my career and so forth and so on. And we'll get back to each other shortly. Unless it's, hey, I'm at the hospital with a kid with a broken arm or something, then it's, hey, I'm going to put my boss or my job on hold for a second so I can go be a family guy for a moment.
Definitely has worked for us, though. And we still use FU. I mean, even though my job may not seem important, or as money-making as Nigel.
Say that.
Right, Nigel wouldn't say that. He would never say that. But I still get to use it. When I have fourth graders who are yelling at me, which happened today, and Nigel's like, hey, I need to know, and I'm like, F you, because my classroom's falling apart, I still get to use it. I could be at home while Nigel's on the road, and I'm dealing with, a child that is melting down or whatever and needs mom's attention, and Nigel's like, hey, honey, how's it going? Can I FaceTime you? What are we doing? What are you guys doing for dinner tonight? And I'm like, F you, like, I have something bigger going on in this household. And we'll get back to you. So it's just finding that language to really cut it short and get to the point.
Hello, everyone. Once again, the ExploreVM Podcast is looking for guests for Season 2. We've got some great content lined up and want to keep the show rolling. Do you have a product, project, or solution you think can help others? Was your abstract rejected for a conference but you'd still like to present your idea? Or do you simply just wish to share your story? Please contact me at paul@explorevm.com or ping me on Twitter. Let the ExploreVM Podcast help your brand and help others grow. Now, back to the show.
So that's the other thing we've done. What is the other stuff that we do? I mean, we're so intentional about our time.
I don't know.
Uh-oh. Don't do that to me. Don't it's been a while since... the other thing that I, will always say is that the more people I meet, like Paul, and the more times that I have the ability to connect with other people in the VMware community myself and other spouses, it makes it easier for some reason for Nigel to be away. It helps me understand that I'm not the only spouse with a husband or a partner who his focus isn't always here in this household, that he's got a lot going on, and he wears a lot of hats, and he's got a lot of, like, I'm sitting at his desk right now looking at his social media going, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not Nigel. Because there's stuff everywhere on this computer screen and I don't get any of it.
That's intentional. It's encrypted for your view.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, as long as my computer works, I'm good. So I think that we have just floundered in some ways because let me tell you, just like every new couple, I'm sure the first year of marriage we were struggling.
Trying to figure it out. You had a great new job, and we were all excited, and then it really took off. I mean, it just it had to be figured out. So.
It had to be figured out, and we had to do it quick because our youngest was 4 months, and the oldest one was.
We wouldn't be here 12 years later talking about it. So.
No, and we just wish that that I had more opportunities to meet some of these spouses and answer the questions of how do you guys do it. Because not everything that we do is going to work for everyone. It works for us. But at some point, to really foster a relationship and have someone working in the IT world, you really have to become very intentional with your time.
Yeah.
And it's and learning that language. Nigel can go IT geek on me sometimes, and I just look at him and I'm like, I don't care.
So I'll speak on that for a second, unless you have anything else there, Paul, but I'm going to continue talking here over your edit.
You're fine. Keep going.
So what I would say is important to me and to Heather and to keeping things sane is something simple as communication, right? Sure, we're not always happy with each other, or we're not always happy with what we've done or said, or whatever the case may be, or we're angry that we have to be adults.
Being an adulting is hard.
But the one thing that I think I share with a lot of folks that ask about this is really the calendar, and if that's something that you draw on with pen and paper or expos or whatever magic marker, it's a calendar. If that's something that works for you in a digital format, you just have to find it. We were lucky enough to work together, and we enjoy updating our family Gmail calendar. And we both have it connected on our phones, so we can see when there's a doctor's appointment. We can switch things around easily. If I'm out of town or this week I'm in town, I'm going to go and attend one of the doctor's appointments with my wife and child, which is great because I haven't seen the doctor in a while, so it's good to get caught up on those things. We also have a dry erase calendar that's on the wall as you exit the house. We go through our garage door, so it's in the kitchen through the garage on the wall, and it has everything on there from what time my kids are working on their shifts, so we know if they're available to babysit. It has, when family's coming into town. It has,
school stuff. It's everything.
Nigel's here. Heather's going to visit her mom. Whatever the case may be, we try to keep that updated. And it's a challenge at times. It's not easy. So there's times when you're on the weekend, you just want to chill on the couch and do nothing, or sit outside because it's nice. We try to force ourselves to get that done. That's the one thing, because we'll forget. I don't want to always look at my phone. It's nice to kind of walk in the kitchen and be like, oh yeah, that's what's happening next week. So
yeah, so our family's very visual, and IT is great, but we do have a 12-year-old that is just now getting her first cell phone, and just now has access to family calendars and that kind of thing. So all of us are very visual, and so the calendar was kind of a recent addition to our.
Yeah, I think the family calendar we talked about for a long time. We tried a bunch of apps on the phones, and nothing really was in just as simple and intuitive as just a calendar with a thing that says doctor appointment at 10:30. All those cool apps for families are nice, but I think it causes a lot of learning curve, and I don't expect every husband or wife in a relationship to be as tech savvy as the other partner. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still get phone calls when the internet's down at home, so you know how that goes.
Oh yeah. And actually, I was going to ask, as this is a technology podcast, what's like a tech that's involved with keeping things organized? And to your point about Google Calendars, that's something that my wife and I started doing a long time ago. Because if I'm working late, or I'm in a different city, or X, Y, or Z, or even I'm going to a show with some friends, everything is on there. And if something is missed, it almost throws a wrench in the works, because you completely you think you've got this all planned out, then all of a sudden oh wait, no, we've got plans that day or that weekend, and all right, let's really step back and figure out where we went wrong on that one.
Look at the picture.
Yeah.
Right. And we've had to the point of like our daughter, we scheduled 3 months in advance for some of her medical needs. And all of a sudden we're looking, Nigel and I are like,
who's going to go do that?
Because we forgot to write it on the calendar. I mean, you're right. It totally throws a wrench into things, but it comes back to people finding what works for them. And really exploring,
some new habits.
New habits, and it's a habit. It takes a little bit of time for it to become a habit. I think the first couple months that we used the calendar, it was kind of meh. But if you see it now, it's like color coded for kids and all kinds of things, and it just makes it easy to work. So it's going back to finding what works for you. Calendars may not work for every person. Having meetings may not work for every person. Having your own language to talk to each other may not work. But what is it that you're struggling with in your marriage? Identifying that without emotion and saying, this is broken, now let's sit down and discuss it.
Right. And even to that point, and I think Heather touched on this about roles, we don't really have that structured role. I think when we first met, I was the one paying bills and so forth, and ironically, Heather was in a job where she has a huge credit and collections background, so she wanted to, take that part over. And I was like, oh God, you're going to pay bills for me? This is awesome. That's great. So, and then I also will go do, the grocery shopping, and she's like, what? You do the grocery shopping? I'm like, yes.
I hate grocery shopping. I hate it. I hate going to the grocery store. I will sit down at my computer and I will order groceries. I'll do that all day long, but don't make me go in there. Especially dragging children. I just don't like it. Nigel is a superstar at grocery shopping. I am sorry. He went grocery shopping, and every time you compare because we grocery shop by week, and so if you compare week to week.
Oh, the cost, yeah.
Yeah, the cost. Nigel kills me every time.
We did have a little challenge. I'd like to take a picture of the basket and say, hey, how much did this cost,
So are there coupons involved then? Are you a big couponer?
I have to tell you, Paul, I'm not a couponer. I'm the guy that's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and then I forgot the coupon for the for 50 cents off paper towel or whatever it is. Right. So yeah, that's not me. Now leave that to Heather. A couple years ago, she was a couponing machine.
Sorry.
So she did really well with that, and then it got to the point where she was like, this is a lot of work. I'm wasting a lot of time. But anyhow, that's when I got into like, hey, let me go do this, or you take care of the problem at home. I'm going to go put headphones on and just smile and wave at everybody at the store and just get my stuff done.
So we really don't follow, Nigel does laundry, I do yard work.
Hey, can you say that again? I do laundry?
Nigel does laundry.
Yes.
But I also mow the lawn when you're gone.
Yes, I've seen you mow the lawn plenty of times.
Right. And so we have very untraditional roles, and we both have our own strengths and weaknesses. I am all about finances. I love numbers. And it wasn't Nigel's strength. So we looked at
like numbers. You just pass them off to other people at the store, right?
Right. Yeah. You just hand them your debit card. So we really looked at what our strengths and weaknesses were, and that's kind of how that organically grew. Nigel, he's great at a ton of things, and I'm great at a ton of things, but there's no reason that we should be fighting for control over those things. Just take them and do them.
Right.
I don't think we ever sat down and fought out who was going to do what in this house. It was more like, oh, I love doing that. I'll do it. And I love the scheduling, and I love the calendar, and I love the follow up with people and talking. I love all of that stuff. And Nigel was more of the, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to do the grocery shopping. I'm going to check off my list. Oh, that's another thing that we have
added. Sounds very IT, doesn't it? Let's knock off this list so we can get done by Friday, right?
What else I just feel like this is so natural to us that sometimes when we have to go back and revisit it, I'm like, what are we doing? The new thing that we're doing, that we're trying.
Maybe we need, I'll let you speak on that, but maybe we need to kind of package a couple of things together to say, maybe this is the starter kit and it doesn't work for everybody, but calendaring was a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Communication I think is key. Obviously everyone communicates,
Right.
but communicating in a way that makes sense, and it's hard to take the emotion out. I know that's easy for us to say, but sometimes, the emotion comes right back in there. I'm not going to lie and say that we talk all the time with no emotions, or we'd all sound like Ben Stein. So.
Mm-hmm. The new thing that we're doing right now is Nigel said to me one day, successful people make lists and cross their lists off. So when we have, and we'll do it tonight, most definitely.
Yeah, we haven't done that in about 2 weeks.
Because you haven't been home.
Yeah.
When we're home, and Nigel's going to be home for a stretch of time, like he is home this week, then at nighttime, we quickly meet, and we're like, okay, I need to get these 5 things done tomorrow. And I mean, literally, they could be the weirdest, corniest things, like I need to drop off, save the dates to the mailbox. I mean, things that I've been forgetting to do. It could be wedding, it could be family, it could be anything. As you can tell, this wedding is taking over our lives.
How many times did you say wedding today?
I know. I'm going to be so glad when this is over. We love our kids, but weddings
my firstborn, I'll show you my age. My firstborn child is being married at the end of this year, so that'll make me feel old in October when that happens. But yeah, but the list was a really neat idea because
and it really was.
It's very satisfying, I should say.
But it was also very motivating. Like, I found myself, not wanting to sit down after we took Sarah to the bus.
I think you just wanted to check off more stuff on your list before I did.
Oh, whatever.
Make it a challenge.
But, yeah.
But we had silly things like, hey, the garage is making that weird noise when it opens and closes the door. I'm putting that on my list to, go get some WD-40.
Right.
It's like all the little things that pile up that you just don't get to. And some of the bigger things, we do have some bigger goals. My office, I have my own office in the house, and it was
a disaster.
I don't even know if disaster begins to describe it. But that was like, okay, that's the overwhelming goal, but today I need to break it down into parts. Like, I need to clean off this one desk today because it was so overwhelming that it was such a mess since we moved in that...
We went from 2 offices down to 1 for Heather, so she had double the amount of stuff in one space. So it was very overwhelming. So we spent some time and, we bought a shelf one week, and then we bought another shelf, and
finally got them together.
And,
But it was, the list really helped kind of get that done finally. It finally broke it down enough that I could get it done. And there's just so many details to running a household and I feel very successful now that Nigel said that. Successful people make lists, and I feel successful when I cross the stuff off my list. So
the internet is true.
Oh, Lord have mercy. So that's a new thing that we're trying is making very, very short lists of what we're going to do the next day and seeing if we can cross it off.
Like 5 or 6 things.
It's 5 or 6 things. It could be, oh my gosh, it could be like making a doctor's appointment or making calling the insurance, simple things, but it's getting it done. So that's one of the things that we've added just recently. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, things evolve. There's some things that we've done for the last 12 years of our marriage, and there's things that we are just learning because there's a need. And so we take a look at everything that needs to get done in our family and how we're going to manage all of those things without stepping on each other's toes, without getting angry at each other, and getting the stuff done. So that's what we're doing right now. That could change. And as we get closer to, big dates like weddings and Jamaica next year, the list will change again. And our needs will change as a family, and we'll have to sit down and talk about that again.
Yeah, evolve. I mean, you got to kind of evolve with each other. And that sounds a little silly, but it's, you tried really hard. This is something I think I've told someone before, but you've tried really hard to impress that guy or girl in your life, when you dated, and then you kind of get into the marriage and you're like, oh, I'm set, set it and forget it. And we all do. It's just normal, yeah. And yeah, everybody still, for the most part will say, like, I'm still happy at this stage, but it's just kind of doing those little extra things. I mean, my sappy part of me is that I went out and I purchased a book on Amazon called How to Date Your Wife. A great book. I'll throw that out there. And it's just simple things on how to pay attention to each other when with limited time and valuing that. So definitely a good read. And just kind of gives you a different perspective. Like it's okay to still talk to each other like you date each other, but it's also
which is super fun and it makes our kids grossed out.
Yeah, and it's also it's healthy, right? So it's there's days when we probably sit across in our separate offices and don't talk to each other on purpose because we've had such crappy days. We're trying to figure our own selves out first, like don't bother me, or wow, you had 2 cups of coffee today, and then there's a growl,
Yeah.
So
it's just I don't know. I'm very thankful that we learned the first time what we learned.
Yeah.
In marriage. And again, I don't recommend starter marriages to everyone, or to anyone actually, because they can be messy. But really saying, I'm going to balance my life and my career because both are very, very important, and really being intentional about how you're going to do that. I think flying by the seat of our pants for the first year or 2 of doing this was probably, we wasted a lot of time.
But we didn't. There's no answers. There's no book. There's no checkbox. You got.
It's like kids. You don't get a parenting book.
No.
You get to figure it out.
You got to figure this out, and this is what worked for us. The one last thing I'll touch on is someone had said, "Well, how do you get a boss to understand that?" And that's probably the hardest thing to answer. I know Heather worked in a heavily male-dominated field in the propane industry for a long time. I was very lucky at my job, and I just chalked it up to I had a boss who was in a similar situation. His wife taught sign language, and she did private classes. So she would leave to do class, and he would leave and drive home 3 or 4 miles and take care of the kids for 2 hours and then come back to the office. So I had a compassionate boss, and it worked out to my favor. And I know that doesn't happen everywhere, but I think it's something that can be talked about out loud with a boss, and it may not be accepted everywhere. But I think just speaking about it and saying, hey, I have some needs at home, or I have a sick family member, or I have something going on, and giving that heads up before the crap hits the fan, basically. When you say, oh, I got to bail, I got to go and take care of this, or I'm going to be out next week. Those things ahead of time, giving that heads up, I think is the best possible way, unless you're in a situation where you have an accepting, management team or boss or, team coworkers. But it can be difficult, I got looked on as like, oh, don't you have a wife to take care of that stuff? And I'm like, well, that, first of all, that's probably not what you should say to me. But second of all, I'm like, yeah, and she's actually not here. She's in Alaska for 3 weeks working. So I'm going to go home and take care of my kids like a dad should. So
yeah, I was very fortunate when I interviewed at my current employer that one of the things that was mentioned during the interview was, yes, there's going to be days you're going to need to work longer, but, stick within your hours. And if we find out you're missing, a family event or a soccer match because of work, you're going to be in trouble with the company, not just your wife or your significant other. It's why are you missing family for a project you can schedule whenever?
And I think the great part is that a lot of these IT communities are starting to recognize the importance of that work-life balance. It's going to take a long time for industries to change and for people to change, right. But the good news is that we're starting to see some of that change.
Yeah, I see the change.
Which is really exciting.
Things can change, and I think we're seeing a lot of people talk about the same ideals. And I'm fortunate enough to work for another company now that has a good balance of work life or community and things like that. So I'm fortunate once again But I know there's people that are not. So
fortunate.
It's gonna get there, I believe. I think it's something to openly talk about, not be embarrassed of it. We all have families. Your boss has a family. They have a husband or a wife. They have the same things going on, and maybe they have the same struggles that they're not willing to talk about, or they're doing it in different ways to kind of get by. So it's something not to be afraid of, to kind of talk about. We wouldn't be good leaders or parents if we sat back and just kind of hung around and tried to say, no, I'm going to take a nap and it'll figure itself out while I'm asleep.
And the other thing is that it goes, and Nigel and I are never going to be able to answer how to handle your personal situation at work with your team and your leader at work. Because I don't know that person, I wouldn't know how to talk to them and say, oh, this is how you would need to approach the subject. No, I don't know you that well. What I can say is, guess what? I can't fix that problem, but what I can fix is internally in your marriage, I can give you some tips and tricks to help you be intentional with your time when you're at home with your family to make that time even better. And what little time you have at home, let's make it good. Let's talk about how we can, as a family, do that. And so that I think I can do. Unfortunately, I can't fix everybody's work-life balance.
Why not?
Unfortunately.
You're supposed to be the professional in
No.
this situation.
No.
Well, I will say a lot of what you've discussed during this episode resonated with me, and some of the stuff like evolving with your spouse and throughout your career and your life, and just a lot of the little bitty things here and there, like it's stuff I've already practiced. So again, I hope people listen to this episode and pull a lot out of it, because again, it's not always just about your career, and you've got to be happy, obviously, with your work. You've got to keep your family life going. It's a delicate line we walk, especially those of us who are gone quite a bit or work strange odd hours. So with that being said, I could let you two talk for another hour, but we are reaching the end of our time. Is there anything upcoming that either of you are working on? Any projects, blogs, appearances, anything you wish to share with the audience?
So Nigel more so than me. I've taken a way step back right now while we deal with kids and aging parents and that kind of thing, and weddings, because weddings are the top of everything right now. So Nigel, though, he is all over the place.
So for myself, I am, I guess you'd say, catch me outside. So no, I'm going to be next up. I will be at the Wisconsin VMUG UserCon on April 5th. Will you be there, Paul?
I will be in attendance, yes.
Hey,
Yay.
All right. So yeah, I'll be out there and then doing some partner road shows for VMware, and nothing that the major community may or not see, but in the South, Dallas, Texas, Houston, and Atlanta soon. So besides that, you will see me at VMworld.
Excellent. Well, well, once again, I want to thank you for your time.
No,
thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening. As we strive to succeed in business, it's important to keep your family in mind as well. I know I could not have achieved half of what I've accomplished in my career if it wasn't for buy-in and support from my family. Be sure to take some time away from your job, studies, or projects and keep those loved ones close. Do you have some tips on work-life balance? Do you have an idea or a topic for the show? Would you like to be a guest on the ExploreVM podcast? If so, please contact me on Twitter at ExploreVM, email paul@explorevm.com, or facebook.com/ExploreVM. And as always, thank you for listening.